Supergirl Season 3, Episode 3, Far From the Tree. This was a really good episode. Like, every once in a while, they have a great episode, and this was definitely one of them. I was very surprised by it as well, because at first it was like, okay, this is a good episode, and, I thought initially it was like, okay, this is like our one emotional moment, because they've done that so far this season. Each episode has had at least one emotional moment, and I was like, okay, kind of started off early, and even before the emotional moment, I was like, okay, this should be a fun episode. We have Alex and Maggie having the bridal shower, so I just like those characters. So I'm like, all right, cool, we'll see what happens there. That'll be like the side story to the episode, and that's what I thought, at least going into it. And I was like, okay, that should be fun. That'll be the side story. Our main story, they're bringing back the fact that Megan got in contact with Jean, and it's like, hey, you have to come to Mars. So he's like, something's going on, gotta go to Mars. And Kara decides to go with him, and Alex is like, hey, if I could have been there, I would be going with you as well. But, she'll be your backup. You guys go ahead. We'll do the party. No big deal. It's not like they're missing the wedding. It's like, it's fine. You have to do this. It's Mars. So they end up going. It's like, oh, this should be fun. They go to Mars. They meet McGann. We meet Talal was like the only dude I remember from the other characters. I know they introduced like another female character, but Talal was like the angry dude who was jumping in. I also recognize the actor because he's been in a couple other shows that I watch. Every time I see him, I'm like, hey, that's the dude from Defiance, which sadly got canceled. But it was funny seeing him show up because he was just in another show that ended like last month, and I was like, oh man, he's just in all my shows. But it was like, okay, cool. We get to see Mars, and then as it goes through, it's like there's another Green Martian. And with this being television, I was like, they're gonna, Jean is gonna look up at that TV, and I'm like, he's gonna say he knows this dude. And I was like, he better not say that. And he was like, that's my father. And I don't know what's wrong with me. I guess I'm just that nerdy. But I was like, I really don't want him to know this guy. And then he was like, it's my father. I was like, oh, that's amazing. I was like, I knew he was gonna say that, but for some reason, it was still cool. So that ends up being his father, who, for people who may not know this, I didn't realize this until I went on Twitter. That is Carl Lumbly, I want to say is his name. He is the guy who did the voice for Martian Manhunter in the Justice League cartoons. So for anyone who may not have remembered that, because it's been forever since I've seen it, so that's not one of the things. It's not like, Kevin Conroy, who still does Batman. I wouldn't recognize that, if I heard him, because it's been so long since I watched the Justice League cartoons. So I didn't recognize that was his voice. And then I was like, holy crap, that's super cool that they did that. That's like just another little thing. And that's an even deeper cut than like, actors coming back like Dean Cain and Erica Durance from like actual live action stuff with, the characters. This was from Martian Manhunter, and they got like the voice actor from the old Justice League cartoon. So that I thought was super awesome. Their whole story, like everything, I think that's kind of where it kicked in. It was like, okay, as cool as the emotional stuff, he's like meeting his dad, he's not alone. That was the first emotional moment, but it wasn't like the dialogue moment. I was like, okay, cool. And then I think after that, comes back from commercial and everything, and that's where we have like the dinner before the next day of the party and everything. And it's Alex and Maggie having dinner with Alex and Kara's mom. And so they go through the conversation. It's like, if you don't mind me asking, oh, that was weird. If you don't mind me asking, why aren't you super close with your parents? And I was thinking, okay, this will be emotional, but this is a story that we know. Like, we know what happened, and it sucks, but we're kind of gonna get this story, and we'll hear what Alex's mom has to say about that, and it'll be like a tiny bit of reflection, development, that sort of thing. That's where I thought it was headed. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to hear it. I don't mind a recap because it was last season. I don't mind that sort of recap, and it's a quick story. It's simple and it's sad. And then it ends up being like this whole new element to the story where we get the exact details of what happened. And it wasn't just, oh, they found out and she was gone. Like, because that's, even though that was sad, it was like the simple version where it's like, no, it just didn't work. And then I left. And this was like the full detail of, she basically, and I don't know, for some reason it made the story like stronger, or more impactful. And it was that it happened while she was at school, and her parents found out, and it was her getting home was when she found out that they knew. And basically her life was taken and just put into a suitcase, and that was it. And her dad like drives her, and she even says like, we drove for a super long time, and we didn't say anything. I knew what was wrong, but I didn't say anything. So eventually I did, and I said, what was wrong? And he said, you shamed me. And I was just like, that is so horrible. It's such a horrible thing to say. But I was going through, and it's just like, wow, that is insanely sad. And she gets dropped off with her aunt, and then that was it. Like, she never talked with her parents for years. I think they mentioned that she was 13 or 14 when that happened, so over a decade, you know, and it's just like, man, that is insanely sad. And, you know, they go, like I said, the extra details of the story just make it so much more impactful. It's just like, wow, we got the super basic version. It was just like, they found out, they didn't like it, I left. And it's like, no, this was like just boom, like it hit her. Like as soon as she entered her home, it was, her life had basically been cut off from what it once was. And then, as they talk about it later, Alex and Maggie mentions, like, you know, basically, you know, I'm assuming she found this out through her aunt, but it's like, my mom took me out of all the pictures. They basically erased me, you know, from the photo albums, and it's like, I didn't exist, like their only child. At least as far as we know, like, she's never, Maggie's never mentioned she had siblings, from what I remember. And it's just like, man, that is so sad. It's like so depressing. And Alex was trying to help her. I was like, you know, maybe you can get in touch with them. It's been a long time. Maybe they've changed. And Maggie ends up doing that. She calls her dad. He shows up, but her mother does not. And she even says, like, you know, you don't have to explain this. So he's like, oh, she doesn't like to fly. And it seemed like he was definitely going towards the route of an excuse for why she didn't show up. But it was interesting. And it was like, okay, when he actually showed up, it was like, all right, it's really awkward, you know, the hugs and stuff. And I was like, all right, let's see how this plays out. And then we find out that he'd been like following all of her cases and stuff like that. And they have like this moment where, you know, he's like, you know, for 18 years, no one had a lead and stuff. It was like, how'd you figure it out? And she used a lesson that he taught her when she was a kid. It was like, you remember that? She's like, I remember everything. And it was like, okay, this is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's, you know, he had actually been, you know, Googling her and like, you know, checking up on his daughter, even though they never talked. He still was always like, you know, checking up on her. And I was like, oh, that's not what I was expecting at all when they would actually interact. It would just be kind of like, these are two people meeting almost, you know, for the first time after, you know, that much distance between you. It's like they're meeting for the first time, and that really wasn't the case. And so, you know, you can tell it threw her off. It was like, oh, like you actually know not only what I'm doing, and, you know, of course, he learned some stuff from her aunt, because even when she says, like, I'm living in national cities, like, oh, she told you. So, you know, it made sense. But it was like, okay, this is definitely, you know, more cohesive than I would have imagined, honestly, with, you know, the story of what it was. And I was like, all right, let's see how it continues. And then it goes on to the party and everything, and, you know, that's, of course, when things start to get awkward for him. He meets Alex, and I was like, okay, so he's, you know, still awkward, naturally, totally makes sense. You know, it's his character, so, you know, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me why it's weird, but, you know, with the character, I was like, all right, that's to be expected. So, you know, they kind of continue to go through, and then they have Maggie get like her first gift, and of course it's from Alex, and, you know, they end up kissing, and her dad sees that, and he like fumes up, and I was starting to get mad myself, honestly, because I was like, I know he's not about to take off here, but of course he did. He got mad and he left, and Maggie follows after him, and she's yelling at him and stuff, and then they have this. It like almost blew my mind, because I was like, okay, what the hell? Like, you know, he can't accept that she's a lesbian. It's just like, it's, I don't know, get over it. That's all I can think. I don't know what to say in that situation. I'm not closed-minded like that, so I don't care. But I was like, what, like, the reasoning that he has, what could it possibly be? And then he goes, and it's, like, he talks about, I thought he was going to say it was because Alex was white with the way he started off his story. I thought that's why he was going to say that, because we didn't technically know the race of the girl that she said that to when she was a kid. I thought he was legitimately going to say that it was because she was white specifically, but that's still, like, a huge part of it. And it was just like, holy crap, this went into, like, way more than what I thought it was. It was, like, this weird thing where it was, like, a part of it was, I mean, really, where it came from had nothing to do with her actually being gay. It was the, you know, the prejudices that he went through when he was younger, and he talks about how, you know, I did all of this stuff, and I dealt, you know, with these people making fun of me and kicking me till they broke my ribs. I was like, Jesus, this is, like, it was just a shock how, it was like, somehow I feel for this guy now. Like, the whole episode, I was just like, you know, about him, and then I'm like, now I feel bad for this guy, because he went through, like, a bunch of racist crap. And so it was just crazy, where it was like, it's already gone from emotional here to, like, his backstory is super emotional, and how he went through all this crap, and that's why he can't accept the fact that she's gay, because during the time when she, you know, they initially found out that she was, it was still, I mean, it's crappy now, if I'm being honest, but it was even crappier. And it was just like, holy crap, it was like, it's still warped, because it's still, it's like, even if the world doesn't And I get, like I said, I understand like why he had that twisted mentality of it, where it's like I wanted my kids to belong. He also did say kids, but that could have just been like the sort of random thing where you just say kids, future kids, because you don't know if you have more than one. So I assume that that's what that was, because it would be weird if we do find out later that she actually had a brother or sister. It was like never brought up. That would be super weird, especially with this episode in particular. But just the way it all played out, I was like, holy crap. And like I said, still doesn't make sense because it's still his own ideals don't need to be put on her. But it was like, I at least kind of understand the weird place where he's coming from, where it's like, I'm mostly mad because the world is so crappy. I almost had to get, like, that's where it gets dumb, because he still got rid of his daughter, so it's like, it's still just dumb. But it was like, dang, that's crazy. It's like, I can't believe I have any care towards what happened with this guy. And they go through the story, you know, present day stuff as well, talking about the wall and everything. I was just like, I was on the couch and I was just waiting, and then he went through the story, and I was literally just like sinking in the couch, like, this is like way beyond what I was expecting for this episode. Like, so much real stuff, like present day, and you know, all of it was real that unfortunately people have to deal with, whether it's you know, prejudice as far as sexuality, color, you know, skin color, that sort of thing. And it was just like, wow, I was not expecting it to go that deep, where it went to the point of racism. And that's why he oddly had this prejudice where he had to get rid of his daughter because he wanted her to fit in. But he went through it, you know, him and his wife, they did it in the worst possible way by getting rid of her. And it was just like the craziest reasoning, but also such painful reasoning as well. It's like, wow, this is nuts. Like, it still doesn't make sense what he did, but the way he got to that warped version was because of the pain that he shouldn't have gone through to begin with, that he had to deal with. And it's like, this is nuts. So crazy. You know, there's just like an insane amount of emotion there. And ultimately, you know, things, you know, the way it all kind of comes down to it is that Maggie doesn't need her parents, you know, and she, you know, I'm kind of in the same place as her, where it was like, I get like the first part of the story, and then where it ends is just like, but you let her go, and that's the dumb part. So he still, you know, they still let their own daughter go, and of course that's where she ends up, where it's like, I don't need you, like, I am good, and she gives him the picture back before she leaves, and it's just like, man, that was a great freaking storyline. And then unfortunately, this is like the one thing that they did to ruin the episode for me. It was just the baby thing, which I thought was dumb in the last episode, and I was just like, that's gonna be something that is not gonna keep them together. And I hate that so much, because I feel like that's the only place it's leading to, because of course it's Maggie saying, I don't want kids, you know, I see us having a grand future together and stuff, but I don't see kids in that future. And it's like, you know, I guess you need to figure out if you feel the same way. And of course Alex is in that normal love state where it's like, I want this to work because I've never loved someone like I loved you, like we're getting married. And so she's just like, well, of course I do. And it's like, that's not true. And it's so crappy. Like, I don't know if it's like the actress who plays Maggie got like another offer on the show, or if they're just writing her off to begin with. I don't know. But I'm just like, I know that this is going to go to them breaking up. I don't know if that means she's officially going to leave the show, because she still lives in the city. She's still a cop and she still knows everyone. So I don't know if she would just not be in the show anymore. But either way, it's like, I can tell that this is going to lead to them not being together. And that sucks. Especially after stuff like this, where they go through these, I mean, I guess that's just a relationship in general, and people still do break up, but you go through emotional moments, but it almost feels worse when it's a TV show, because it's like, if they're together, then, and you have like these epic moments that bond them together even more so, you know, it's weird, you know, especially because it's like they're going towards the marriage and everything, and then it's like, the beginning of the rest of their lives together, and then like the end of them period is like neck and neck with this whole baby thing, and I'm just like, this sucks. Like, that's just where it's headed. And it's like, that is the worst thing ever. I don't know why it's happening, but it's just like, I can tell that that's what it's headed towards. But I love that storyline, and I would say it was hard to tell. I think it was almost like split right down the middle as far as both storylines, but they're both amazing. Without, you know, had all the emotional stuff there, and then going back to Mars with Jean and his dad, and just the first interaction was emotional, and it was like, holy crap! This was before Maggie's dad came in, and when Jean's dad was like, you know, you can't be my son because my son never would have fled. I was like, wow, maybe this episode is just about dads who are dicks, because I was like, that was kind of a mean thing to say, but ultimately it had more to do with the fact that he just assumed it had to be a trick, and he was kind of just saying like, my son never would have fled and stuff like that. So I think that was more defensive. By the time we got to the end, I was like, okay, maybe that was more of a defensive thing than he felt like his son wasn't honorable because he left or anything. So I was like, okay. By the time it ended, I was like, all right, he's not a crappy dad or anything, because they even do the memory. And it's like, okay, he like surprised his son and stuff. I was like, they were definitely cool. That was totally like defensive, because he was just like, this can't possibly be my son. I can't let myself be hurt like that. But of course, it continues on, and he talks about Jean, thinking that he's a white Martian. Him talking about how the white Martians killed their people and stuff like that, which also kept making, I swear that was making me laugh the whole episode, that they just kept calling them the whites, and I was just like, I don't know how many Tiki Torch purchasers watch Supergirl, but this episode probably made them mad. But the whites were the bad guys. But yeah, they're going through, and it was just like, man, it's Jean trying to figure out, how do I get through to my father before things get really dramatic. Because then I think it was like after the second interaction is when or maybe it was after the very first one, and Talal was like, we have to do, it was like Trigar or Tygar or something like that, and that's forcing their way through his dad's mind, which could have possibly killed him. It's like, I'm not going to let that happen. And so he tries to talk with him again, and then this time he does it in his John Jones form. And it doesn't really, work out. And unfortunately, Talal is like, all right, well, screw this. It's been too much time. He like knocks McGann into the wall. She wasn't really in it as much as I thought either. Like, she was there, but she wasn't really in it too much. And definitely, Kara was. It was so crazy. It was like, man, this is really focusing on like the side characters, which I totally loved, especially because it was a great episode. But he's like, all right, screw this. Knocks McGann down. Kara like punches him and knocks him out, and is like, hey, we should probably get out of here. And so then they head to Jean and his dad's home. And that was a great moment too, where he's like, how dare you bring me to this home where I lost my son and my grandchildren, like I lost my family. And he was so stuck, because, of course he'd been just like John, where it's like, this can't possibly be my son. Of all the Green Martians that survived, the only other one is my son. So he's like, how could you possibly do this? And it's like, clearly the only way you did this is because you broke through my mind. Like, he just could not believe it was his son. And so, they give Kara actually, something to do outside of punch a little bit. And so she's the one who gives she literally gives the superhero speech. Like, she is the superhero coming in to, like, basically have, like, her one actual moment this episode outside of the fight, where she's like, this is what's happening. Like, I'm from, Krypton. You can tell I'm not a white Martian and stuff. And she kind of gives her story of, dead people versus dead homes and stuff like that. And it's like, even if this is not your son, it's like, she says it in the beginning, it's like, he is your son, but it's like, at this point, even if he's not, he does actually want to help make Mars better than the generation that came before. Even if he is a white Martian, these are the resistance, and they are trying to fight against, kind of the typical white Martians who are like the villains and stuff like that, which we find out is actually from like a full-on religious story that they have on their planet, where two brothers were given a choice, and one brother chose wrong, and he chose the staff, which was like for power and control. And so like their god cast him into basically hell, and that's where the white Martians came from. And I was like, huh, that's an interesting story. Like, I thought that was actually a pretty cool story. Like, they're actually like almost demons in a sense. So I thought that was actually kind of cool. But, it gets to the end, and, Kara does her, superhero speech, and it works. And so Jean's dad actually lets him, show him a memory. And so he shows him the home and everything, and the grandkids, or his grandkids. And I was like, Jesus, they were all crying, and I was like, all right, I just gotta hold it together. They're gonna talk, and it'll be fine. But it was like, his dad was like, I remember this, and then Jean was like, this is like my favorite memory. It was like, I couldn't tell why my girls were excited and stuff. And it was just like a simple moment where all they did, the girls came down the stairs, and then his dad came through the door, and it was just like a big surprise, because his dad was like this high priestess, so of course, he was busy. And it was just like a great surprise for his son's birthday, where he left early, and got to see his grandkids and tell his son happy birthday. And I was like, Jesus, that was the simplest memory in the universe, and they made that like one of the most emotional things like they've done in the entire series. I was like, that is insane. Like, he surprised his son early from work, and he was like, happy birthday, and that was the whole memory. But it was like the fact that was centuries ago, and that they never thought that they could possibly share that memory, see each other again. There was so much wrapped up in it. And like I said, like all of them crying and stuff, and Jean was like emotional, and he was like, they knew something, and then it cut to Kara, and she was already like almost in full tears, like, what did they remember? And I was like, Jesus, this is a tough scene. But the whole episode was kind of like that, where it's just emotional moment after emotional moment, and it was just great. It was, and of course they go through the memory and they realize, he realizes that Jean is truly, his son, and so they have this great reuniting moment, and then that's when things kind of get crazy. It's like, all right, we have to officially find the staff now. So they get to the staff, they fight the White Martians. No big deal. They go in. McGann was in her Miss Martian form, which I thought was cool because they could have done it when she was in her White Martian form, but then we wouldn't know it was her. So of course they had to do that. But Sean is in there. He's fighting. McGann does her thing. I think his dad. I'm pretty sure his dad was there. I don't remember if his dad actually fought or anything like that. I think he did, but I can't remember. It was kind of just like I was just kind of looking at it. I was like, okay, cool. And then eventually, everyone is starting to get like wiped out by the staff. And so Kara has to like pick it up, and we find out the staff is actually insanely powerful. It's just like poof, and like the White Martians were turning into like shreds of paper in the air and evaporating. And I was like, oh, that's actually way more powerful than they kind of made it seem. It was like, oh, they can take over. That's like an instant kill. They could just do like this, and it's like everyone's dead. So she, takes a bunch out, and then as she's about to get beat up by the White Martian that was there, and this is something that I think was a continuity error as far as the people who did the CG. Because after everyone was taken down and Kara was about to fight, there were 3 White Martians around the staff, but then when she fought, there was only the one. And then when Jean was in the car, which transformed again, he was like shooting machine guns, and then there were 3 again. I was like, I feel like they just put that in the wrong spot, and I was like, oh, well, whatever. It was like a couple of seconds, but ultimately everything works out fine. Jean's crazy cool space car, which is like a 1950s car, but it's actually a spaceship, and I guess gets like space radio, or he just has a really cool, like a really varied mixtape, because they had like the old school song in the beginning, and then Kara was playing Britney Spears. I was like, so is that a mixtape, or is that like space radio? I don't know. Like super serious FM, I guess, in space on Mars. But it was definitely a cool ending, and like I said, the whole episode is just insanely emotional and incredibly well done. It's just without a doubt, one of the best episodes the show has had, just period. But definitely the best one this season so far. It's just like, well, they're definitely important stories. It's not like the main arcs with the villains and all that, but it was just like, this is great. And I don't know what they're going to do with John's dad or anything, but whole episode was absolutely phenomenal. I really loved it. Of course, there's a lot to talk about with this, so I do apologize for this actually being like, I normally don't hit like my actual like 22-minute mark most of the time, even if I normally go like 18 or 20. But this just had so much great stuff, and I really wanted to go like full detail. But a phenomenal episode. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and of course I would love to know what you guys thought about it in general, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, your least favorite parts about it, and I definitely want to know if we have another episode like this, which characters you guys would like to see get involved in some of the more emotional elements. I was surprised by what we got with this, with Jean and Alex and Maggie, and just the extra backstories and stuff. So we'd love to know which characters you guys would like to see and what you thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.